I have a simple rule in life, Dermot. Do the opposite of everything you've done in addiction.
Brian Pennie, welcome to the Mindful Podcast.
Great to be here, Dermot. Really, really looking forward to this conversation, I have to say.
I think you're my most punctual guest so far. We've actually started this interview earlier, and I was wondering, actually, given that he spent so long in your earlier years in a haze of addiction and letting people down and turning up late for stuff and just finding it hard to keep it together, is punctuality really important to you now?
I have a simple rule in life, Dermot. Do the opposite of everything you've done in addiction. That's being punctual, believe you
Really?
me, or even turning up. No, I actually have a weird thing about punctuality. And Natalie, my partner, she wouldn't be great. She's not too bad. She's about 10 minutes late all the time. So I factored in this 15-minute window to protect me from the lateness of that. It's actually it's really important to me, but probably I'm going in the pendulum's gone too far where it's become too important to me. So sometimes you have to let them things go as well.
That's interesting. So is your new approach to life, do you have to watch yourself from being I guess yeah, too punctual or too maybe prone to perfectionism in that
Yeah.
maybe you're monitoring yourself very closely.
Yeah, God, I monitor myself very closely. I think you've got to self-observe, but with flexibility within that. Because addiction is a very rigid game. You follow rules. I need drugs to survive, and that is a rule, and it's embedded within your psyche.
Mm.
Whereas today, ritual and habits and routines very important to me, but life gets in the way. And if you're trying to control everything, you're gonna find trouble. So flexibility and emotional agility and ability to observe that it's okay to bend. So that's something that I'm working on ongoing, I'd say, because I do have a rigid core, let's say.
Well, I guess it's part of your rehabilitation, your rediscovery of
Yeah.
life, and this whole other chapter you created for yourself, which is full of joy and knowledge and curiosity. And do you ever have a nightmare? Do you ever have dreams where you're back there?
Do you know what's weird? You're the first person that's ever asked me that question. I haven't had this dream in about a year, and I'm 12, nearly 12 years in recovery. But I had an ongoing dream, and I probably would have it once every 6 months or once a year. And basically, the dream was, and you know, like dreams are really, really weird, but the essence of the dream and the feelings of the dream were that I was back in addiction and
Mm.
I was back on methadone. I was like really back there, like glued to the like it trapped me fully again. And but the dream was that I couldn't do it again. I can't get out of this again. I won't be able to go through that recovery process again. And how did this happen? And I owed money to a lot of drug dealers as well. And it was the type of dream that when I came out of it, I had to sort of, when I woke up, it felt real and I had to snap out of it for a minute. So it was quite a vivid dream. But I haven't had that in a while, probably even 2 years now, actually.
Yeah, that's so weird. I had a dream where I
Mm.
was a drug dealer and this addict owed me a load of money. And he looked like you.
Did he? How much was it?
That's funny. Yeah, because I
Oh.
think people, who maybe give up smoking or quit drinking or have some big lifestyle change, sometimes they can dream that, oh, they're back there smoking again or whatever. And then they wake up and it's a big sort of, oh, God, oh, I'm so
Yeah,
relieved it didn't happen.
yeah, yeah. That's what it is. When I woke up, I'd feel it, but then it'd be like, oh my God, thank goodness that's not there. And I was fascinated because I feel like I've often talked about this. I don't feel I'm in recovery. I feel I'm recovered. So I found it
Yeah.
quite fascinating that that sort of remnants of fear. Like I've no fear of going back into addiction. I don't feel the lure of any drugs or alcohol. It just doesn't appeal to me anymore. I value other things in life. It's nearly repelling to me, to be quite honest. So I found it quite interesting. So thankfully, it's withering
Mm.
away.
What makes you different, do you think, from the other people you might meet who are in recovery from whatever addiction? And it's very much a sense that every day is this process that, they have to really monitor themselves to stop them falling down this, the same holes, going for the same pitfalls. What makes your sense that you have recovered different to the many addicts who feel like it's just a lifelong slog, and for the rest of their lives there'll be that sense of deprivation?
Yeah, there's a line I heard in recovery circles one time. It's like you're on a road, but you're on the road of recovery, but the ditch is right beside you all the time, and you're always beside that ditch. And someone once said that's a terrible way of living, that the ditch is always there. But someone
Mm,
said in recovery, well, at least you know the ditch is there so you don't fall into it. But I feel like
yeah.
I veered miles and miles and miles away from that ditch. I really do. And I think your question is there's two big factors with that. When I found recovery, and I was in recovery, I would say at that stage, I
Mm,
put my dopamine hooks from cocaine and heroin at that stage. That was my core drug. And I put it into learning and spiritual learning, mindfulness, well-being, personal development, the brain. And I became obsessed. You could nearly say addicted if it was harmful, but it wasn't harmful. It was good learning
yeah.
stuff. So I found something that drove me forward. And that was a core aspect of really bursting into recovery circles in a very happy and fulfilled way. I think another factor for myself when I had a shift in perspective, it was a near death experience that shook me to the core. And I had what can only be described as a spiritual shift. Like when I was in detox after I nearly died, it was like the world glowed, Dermot. That's the only way I can talk about it. It was like everything was in 3D,
Yeah.
everything was
But you know what I'd love to
beautiful.
do, Brian, just for our listeners and viewers, let's
Yeah,
go back, okay? And let's talk to
yeah.
us about the run up and then into that spiritual experience. So,
Okay, yeah,
when did you start? I know we're going to condense a big chunk of your life down
yeah.
into a nugget here, but I'd like people to have a little bit of context. So, what age were you when you started first getting exposed to drugs?
Right, and I think one part of the context I think is really
Mm,
important that I was doing drugs for over 20 years, but drugs were not my problem. Trauma as an infant and trauma as a
mm,
kid was the problem. That created anxiety, panic attacks, and a fear of my inner body.
mm,
And when I started dabbling with drugs around 14, 15 years of age, it started to give me a sense of relief away
mm.
from how I felt.
And a lot
And
of
that
this came
is,
from an operation that you had as an
yeah.
infant.
Yeah, I had an operation, intestinal malrotation. It's called was the challenge I had, which my intestines were twisted. And pre 1985, I only found this out a few years ago. Any infants before 1985, if they underwent surgery, even open heart surgery for that matter, they done it without a general anaesthetic. So I was basically 3 weeks of age, awake while they done an operation on me. And that sounds like barbaric, but it
Yeah.
was based on weak neurological evidence from the 1940s that babies didn't experience pain, they're not going to remember it, and the anesthetic is too dangerous. Now, of course, I don't remember the operation, but as we know with trauma, the body keeps the score. And every time I talk about this, Dermot, I feel an urge to rub the scar on my belly. And you
Mm.
were at an event I did. You were there to do that event with me in the Helix Theatre in 2024. And when I was talking about my trauma with my mom, she was there for the first time at a live event. And when I was talking about that, it was like I went into a stress response based on that. And my brain just shut down. Had to walk off stage for a few minutes. It turned into the best speaking experience of my life. But it's just an example of the trauma still lives there. So what I was doing, I was really soothing myself, medicating myself, giving myself that anesthetic I never got as a baby. And I started dabbling in drugs. I came from a challenging area, lots of drugs in the area. But when I found heroin at 16 years of age, to say it took me to heaven, nirvana is an understatement. It just saw everything softened, everything
Mm.
went quiet. All of those bodily sensations just dissipated and dissolved. And I felt at ease for the first time in my life. And it took me a few years to get physically addicted on a regular daily heroin using basis, but it got me from that very first moment. And it was only a matter of time before it reeled me in because it just gave me that sense of ease.
Yeah. So you continue to use, and your issues got worse and worse. And amazingly, you were
Yeah.
managing to hold down jobs while you were going through this. There's a few individual stories. There's lots of them, obviously, in your book, but some of them really stuck with me after reading it. Bonus Time is the book, and I really recommend it to anybody. Just you have such a great way of telling the story, and because you have those two avenues of lived life experience plus a neuroscientist, you're able to. It's a really interesting observance of yourself going through a lot of times which are again very traumatic for you and the people around you. I know you were close to your grandmother.
Yeah.
And you know, she was a great influence in your life. But the addiction, even around the time of her funeral, um, you know, that meant that you were there, but you weren't really there.
Yeah, so that was near the very end of
Mm,
my addiction. I was in a really, really bad way. Like to put it into context, I could barely walk. I had my knee was infected. I was limping around. I was bloated. I was on death's door, to be quite honest. But my mom, my nan, even at that stage, she wouldn't let anyone say a bad word about me. She'd say, Brian, he looks great. Leave him alone. Leave him alone. I was very, very close to me nan. And but at her funeral, unfortunately, she got undiagnosed sepsis. Like she really shouldn't have died, even though she was 92 years of age. She was a fantastically healthy woman, but she did die. And I went to the funeral, and like I remember my sister describes a moment of the coffin going by, and she just seen my face, and she says, "He's next." And I was actually supposed to carry the coffin. I insisted on carrying the coffin, but I couldn't because of my knee. So I created a scene. And my poor mom, it was her mother's funeral. She asked people, could he bring me home just so they could sort of mourn me nanny in peace. So it's a real challenging moment. And me
mm,
nan never got to see me clean from drugs, which is a bit of a shame. But it's yeah,
mm.
that's a regret I have. It's a regret I have to say.
There's another story about work where you come out of this really important meeting because your company, the people you were working with, knew there was an issue. And you came out of the meeting feeling like it had actually gone quite well.
Yeah,
But that wasn't the case. Tell us about
that's
that.
not the case. And again, for context, I worked in a job for so many years, and
Mm,
like they had my back. We were like family in this place. And Wayne was the manager of the office where I was, a big open plan office, and he inherited the problem of Brian from a previous manager who was from a very nice place in Terranure in Dublin, but knew I was on methadone. She called it his green stuff at me, green stuff. And she says, "Did you do your green stuff today, Brian?" She actually wanted to bring me to her house for a couple of months to get me clean. Like talk about like really dear, dear
mm,
friends that I'm still in contact with today. So as a result of that, I was kind of enabled in the workplace because they protected me. Like when customers came in, they'd hide me, where it was only really keeping me addiction alive. But we moved to merged with another company at one stage, and when other people from outside of the company came into our open office, they were like, "What the hell is going on with that guy? He can't even. He's not even awake most of the day." Like I was literally goofing off at me table, and I was designing pharmaceutical labels and stuff, like a very important quality assured
mm,
job. So it got to the stage where upper management, senior management basically says, we need to have a meeting, Brian. There's some terrible things we're hearing about you in the workplace. So it was basically a meeting with my manager, the shop steward, who was like the union representative, and the two main managers of the company. And we went into the meeting. I thought I performed well at the meeting and kept my, uh, what's the words, gave myself a good account of myself to keep my job. And when I walked out, I said it to Wayne and Mick, who are really good friends. And I says, I think that went well, lads, did it? And Wayne's face, his jaw, I could just see his jaw looking at me. And he says, "What are you talking about, Brian? You fell asleep at the table." So for the meeting to save my job, to say I'm not impacted by drugs, the four people in the room were left looking at me, sort of hanging off my chair, asleep on the table. So that was the moment my job was gone. But that was also the moment that set this catalyst of events that would lead to me finding the life I live today.
mm. Talk to us then about the spiritual moment then. You're going through detox. What happened?
Yeah, so what occurred? I losing my job like that. I was in a lot of debt to fund me drug habit. I
Mm,
sold drugs to fund me drug habit. I done everything I could to get me drugs to survive, but I'd now lost my job. Drug dealers wouldn't even give me drugs to sell because I just wasn't giving them the money. Like I was at that stage where I was just on survival mode, and now I had no income. Now the drugs weren't even working. And I was like, what do I do? I was like a rat trapped in a corner. So
Mm.
I was terrified of living a life without drugs because I couldn't live with anxiety. That was the whole thing for me. I can't live with anxiety. So I didn't know what to do. So the only thing I could think of, well, I'm gonna have to go to one of these detox places and just see what happens and maybe come back and do drugs smarter next time. That was the plan. But I ended up doing a benzo detox at home on my own so I could get into a heroin detox because they wouldn't take me into a heroin detox with benzos in my system. And I ended up having what's known as a grand mal convulsive seizure, where I literally nearly died. I bit my tongue, split it down the middle. I ended up in hospital, absolutely a shell of a human being, obviously going through the withdrawals of the benzodiazepine as well. And I had an experience in the hospital where I thought was brain damaged. I couldn't make sense of the room I was in my world. And I remember thinking I was brain damaged. And I remember just leaning back on a trolley while I was in the hospital saying to myself, I can't do this anymore. And I was waiting to be overwhelmed by panic, fear, everything that chased me my entire life. But instead, I felt a sense of peace. That was my entry point into the world of spirituality, if that's what you want to call it, recovery, peace, calmness of
Mm.
mind.
What do you
And
think that was?
it was a moment of surrender. It was stopping my fight with anxiety. I was stopped resisting reality. It was a moment of surrender and letting go. And I think that was
Mm.
the moment. That was the one moment that sort of changed my perspective. But I still had to go through a bit of time before I fully enveloped this mode of working. And I remember 3 weeks later, the benzodiazepine were out of my system. I was going to a detox facility on the outskirts of Dublin, and when I went to that detox facility, something had shifted through this um moment of surrender. And I remember just having this knowingness, if that's the right way of putting it, that I would never do drugs again. Like before, when I started the journey of detox, benzo detox, I was going to get off drugs and come back and do it better. But now I just knew I would never do drugs again. I don't know what that was. And
Mm.
when I landed in that detox facility, it was a lovely little farm on the outskirts of Dublin. And I went in with a completely different mindset. I went in with an energy and this lust for wanting to live. There was like this whisper in my mind, you might have a life again. And this
Mm.
blew me away. I could have a second chance here. Hence why I called my book bonus time.
Yeah.
And
A lot of
when I
people
went,
might call that God. They might give a big
the,
spiritual component to that. What do you think?
definitely, if you want to call it God, call it God. Like perspective shift, dumb luck, God, divine.
Mm.
Some people in the TV show I done with talking with Gabor Mate, he call it what's called the Dark Night of the Souls. Like Eckhart Tolle, I love his work, and he
Mm.
had a more fulfilled shift. He didn't have the madness of 15 years of heroin addiction to go with it. So I think he had more of a complete shift that was a bit more sensible, let's say, and a bit more pure is one way of putting it. But it opened up a portal for me to live life another way. And when I landed in that detox facility, I'll never forget it. I had this energy or this energy and this want to do things differently. And I start talking about my feelings for the first time. I start reading books about self-awareness, Eastern philosophy. I was blown away by these concepts. And I heard about meditation and mindfulness for the first time. I probably peripherally heard it in addiction, but
Mm.
it wasn't something I was interested in. I don't even know if I had heard of the concept. But I'll never forget the psychologist, the teacher in there telling us at the time, she says, this is called mindfulness, and we want you to focus on your breath. And I says, oh, I can't focus on my breath. I'm terrified of my breath. I'm afraid of my inner body. I'll be thinking about my heartbeat. I'll probably have a panic attack.
Mm.
And she turned around and she says, right, I tell you what, just focus on the air going into your nostrils, cold air going in, and warm air coming out. And I remember thinking, this is hopeless, but I'll give it a go because I was really willing to give anything a try. And this seems bizarre for anyone listening to this that hadn't gone through my experience of being terrified of my body, my own body.
Mm.
And what a thing to be terrified of, like your own body, like you can't run away from that, like you're stuck there. And I was willing to give it a go, and I done this breathing technique. And I was able to focus on the air going in and out of my nostrils for about 5 or 6 breaths. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, this is a miracle. What is going on? How can I actually focus on my breath? And that was a moment, that was a huge moment for me, saying there's
Mm,
something in this here. There's something here that I need to grab onto and hold on tightly to. And I meditated while I was in that 6 week stint in that detox facility. I was meditating every day. There was one moment where I was able to focus on my heartbeat for about 20 seconds. It was the middle of the night. And looking back now, I was going through this transformational shift. And the funny thing is, Dermot, like I was in the depths of withdrawals, heroin withdrawals.
mhm,
I had a fever in my bones that was pulsating and just so many changes emotionally, physically, and psychologically. But if I could go back to any moment in my life, I would go back to those moments in the middle of the night because it was like I was waking up again. And that's the spiritual shift that I was talking about. Something was just waking up inside of me. And
mm.
that was a moment that just really, really transformed how I would live the rest of my life, to
Yeah.
be quite honest.
You're touching on something really important that a previous guest on this series, Katrina O'Sullivan, mentioned,
I
and
know
that's
Katrina,
the,
yeah.
yeah, I'm sure you do.
She's
She's
great.
wonderful, and she's been through her own series of traumas and experience with addiction as well. She talks
Yeah.
about how mindfulness is not a save all, catch all magic wand, that actually, when introduced at the wrong time to someone who has that doesn't feel safe in their body, it can go the opposite way. It can almost re-traumatize them. How did you get over that feeling of feeling safe in your body, where a lot of people might struggle, where it might stir up a lot of negative trauma and
Negative
associations?
stuff. Yeah. So to say that when I talk about those experiences, I was just
Mm,
barely touching off the edge of my trauma. Like I was focusing just barely on my heartbeat, and then I'd be pulled away from it really quickly. I'd say, run away, run away, run away. So I wouldn't go back there. But I have only really, and I wouldn't say I'm 100%. Like I can put my hand on my heart today and focus on my heartbeat, but it's not comfortable. It will never be comfortable. It is, I'm
mm,
at ease with it and I can do it, but I don't think it will ever be comfortable. And even the scar on my belly, I can put my hand there, but it will never be an enjoyable experience. I can be comfortable within it, but I will never enjoy it. And I remember hearing one time, I think it was some kind of Buddhist teaching or teacher, like the Dalai Lama. It could have actually been the Dalai Lama or something like that. And he says, anyone that has experienced deep trauma will never be able to find the pathway that a Buddhist teacher has found through years and years of practicing contemplative meditation. You will never have that. Like your nervous system has been changed so much. So I think somebody practicing mindfulness without the right teacher there, without the right safe sanctuary to be in, it could be
mm,
really overwhelming. And like at its core, like a trauma response changes your biology. Like it's the threat reflex response. It literally changes your biology. It's like your threat reflex system going from 4G to 5G. It's hyper amplified. And what we need to do is we need to change how that biological system responds to triggers and traumas based on past trauma. So you need to extinguish that response. But what you can do if you're not with a teacher and in a safe place and you're doing it in a dangerous way, you can amplify that even further. So you've got to be in the right space if you've experienced trauma. And Katrina is 100% on the ball with that.
mm.
Yeah.
So you befriend your body, you start to become a little bit more comfortable just letting your attention sit with it. What does then that ability to self-observe give you then as you do it more and more?
Yeah, we touched on this idea, or the Eckhart Tolle's work there earlier,
Mm,
and I love Eckhart Tolle's work. I remember I embodied his work so much, and I read it when I was in treatment and detox. I read a lot of all of his books, but I embodied three core principles of his work so strongly that I actually got a little chain and put them around my neck as a reminder in early recovery. And the first one was isness, the isness of life. What is to resist what is absolute madness. Like imagine you're sitting in
mm,
traffic, but you're resisting it in your head. Like what is. And I remember this dawning on me. I was like, oh my God, I have been resisting the isness of life my entire life. So accept what is. The
Mm,
second one is just be. And it relates to that, just be. And I could never just be. I was always doing, I was always running, I was always striving, I was always escaping and avoiding my own body. But just be, just whatever's happening. And again, it touches into this acceptance. But the key player for me was observe self. And this was the mindfulness practice that worked most for me because it was years before I could befriend me heartbeat. Like I remember doing a mindfulness meditation one time and I was all calm and zen. And this would have been 5 years, I'd say, into recovery. And all of a sudden it says, go to your heart center. And I could feel the anxiety building up inside of me. Now I'm not there now. I'd be a different kettle of fish around that today. But this mindful self-observation was key for me because what it enabled me to do was to be mindfully self-observant of my thoughts, my feelings, and most importantly for me, my bodily sensations, because that's where anxiety lived for me. A tightness and these sensations in my chest, squeezing sensation in my
mm,
chest and in the top of my head. And when I became the observer of those thoughts, those feelings, and those bodily sensations, they were no longer me. It was something that came and went away. And everything is transient at the end of the day. Everything passes. And I remember hearing a line one time at a recovery group. It might feel like a kidney stone, but it will pass. So even the most challenging experiences will pass.
mm.
And I think that was really important for me because I've completely changed my relationship with anxiety. Like I enjoy anxiety today, Dermot. That's a crazy thing. That's a miracle. That really is a miracle. And it's not that I enjoy the tightness of the chest, but I enjoy it coming and me observing it and letting it go. And it feels like a win. And every time I do it better and the process gets stronger. So I've changed my relationship with it through multiple different things like movement, exercise, mindful self observation, breath work. There's multiple tools to do that. But the entry point for me was this observational element of it because all of a sudden I was able to observe it and create a sense of detachment that it was no longer part of me. It was something that just happened and went away. And that
Mm.
was key. That was key.
I love that. I know the weather analogy has been used before, and it's a good one,
Yeah.
I think, because we can
Yeah.
understand, particularly as Irish people, the transient nature of weather and that, the clothes
All
horse.
in 1 hour.
Yeah, I know. I'm looking at a clothes horse that's blown over for the 11th time out in my garden here. And I'm not like, oh God, this is unbearable. It's
Mm,
just the way our weather is. And I know, and as you say, in 10 minutes it'll be different. It will have passed. But when it's our internal weather, we find it harder to detach from it. And a change in the weather system internally can really rock us. And we feel like we're going to be stuck in it forever. So I love the idea that you were able to separate out and as uncomfortable as it can be, the ability to observe it can
yeah.
set you free in many ways. Small example. Last night I was in Gatwick Airport, and just as I stepped off the train to go into the airport, I got a message, an alert on my phone to say my flight was delayed by 2 hours, and I was already early. So myself and my son were looking at over 4 hours in Gatwick, which is worse
That's
than
not a
any
great
Irish
airport.
weather.
Yeah.
And I kind of generally have a rule with these things where I allow myself to have, 30 seconds to a minute of fuck's sake, jeez, God's sake, this is crap. Oh my God. I give myself the little rant because I always hate being around people who go, oh, like something terrible has happened. Not to worry, sure, there's buns for sale at the shop. It just doesn't feel real. So I give myself that rah, and then I'm able to then just detach and I go, okay, look at you having a little
Yeah.
bit of a rant and rave there. And, let's just look at this for what it is. It's the isness, there's nothing, this isn't
Yeah.
going to change, you're going to be
Yeah.
here. So let's just be in it and, enjoy each other's company or whatever. So you quickly kind of come back. But
Yeah.
um, I wonder, what did the people you were in recovery with think were you, you know, you're, I just imagine you're having this incredible spiritual enlightenment, you know, this incredible experience, as tough as it was, but you're opening all these doors and seeing new ways of perceiving yourself and the world. And there was probably other people sitting in those chair circles going, I'm getting, I'm getting nothing off this. You know, I'm not feeling
Yeah.
this at all. And were you aware of them struggling to make sense of it?
Yeah, and I couldn't understand it, Dermot, because I thought everyone should be. I'd such a narrow view from addiction, and then it's such a narrow view in recovery, and I thought everyone was. I was sitting there saying, how lucky are we in a treatment center? They're probably after destroying their lives, relationships
Mm,
broken, lost their jobs, and I'm sitting there saying we're so lucky. Like I honestly felt so lucky, and it was delusional when I think back. It was a lack of perspective of other people's sort of viewpoints and lives. But there was something, some people noticed something in me. I was a nuisance for the treatment center. They didn't like me. Like they want you to come in broken, they want to fix you back up or pull you down and fix you back up again. But I was like this like crazy happy person, and they genuinely did think I was on this pink fluffy cloud and it was all going to come crashing down and it was all going to burn and I was going to relapse. So much so they advised me to go to a secondary treatment center because they says he's in a really bad way.
mm.
And there was an ongoing joke. I'll never forget it. It was one lad in the recovery center down in Wexford, and he says, "I can see you in a few years. You'll be cooking pasta with your toe. You'll be playing guitar. You'll be writing a book with your right hand." And they were slagging me, basically saying, "I want to do everything. I want to take a big chunk out of the world. I'm not going to lose any more life." But there was a priest in the center, Father Jim. I'll never forget him, and he noticed, he recognized something in me. He was actually, he used to work with Anthony DeMello, the great spiritual teacher, and
Mm.
my favorite book, Awareness. And he brought me on a walk one day and he says, Brian, can I just say something to you? He says, I know, I recognize something in you. You need to be careful, but stay off the drugs, keep on going down the path, and great things are going to come into your life. But just be aware it's going to take 5 years at least before the fog clears. And he was really, really bang on the money with that, because 6 months ago by and he'd be like, "Oh, I feel even better now." But then another 6 months ago by and I'd be like, "God, I was mad 6 months ago. I feel great now." And that kept on happening. And it took nearly 5 years before I start getting into the normal world and reconditioning myself. But many of the people that I was in recovery with in treatment, like I think I heard terrible stories with most of them where they relapsed, they got back into trouble. So something about this childlike experience of mine really drove me forward. And I still have a playfulness, a curiosity. I laugh at myself. I think that's really important as well. Like if something really bad happens and I catch myself giving out, because that's reflexive. Like it's okay to berate yourself really quickly as long as you can catch it, because reflexively your emotions and your nervous system will kick in. Like anxiety isn't a
Mm.
bad thing. It's a tool to protect you, you know. So you'll get anxious, you might give out about something happening, but an ability to catch that. And I would laugh at myself as well. Say, "Look at you, you bleeding idiot, giving out about yourself." And I'd have this little inner dialogue, but being aware of that as well. But don't take life too seriously. I think that's something that's really important as well.
Yeah. Talk to me about the false self. What's your experience of that? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so it really ties into what we were talking about, that mindful self-observation or this ability to self-observe. And I always think like we sort of need a false self in a certain way. Like it's the masks we put on. And for someone, let's say you're going to a wedding and you're going to a funeral, you're not going to go with the same attitude, the same mentality. You have a different mask, you have a different sense of self, of who you bring, a different personality. So it's something that you need in everyday life. But some people get caught up in the false self, like I'm an academic, I am smart, I have intellect. But that's not who you are. That's just a label. But what can happen from that is if someone challenges your intellect and calls you stupid, the ego or the false self will react and defend itself. For me, it was addiction. The false self was I was an anxious addict. And the idea here is what I found quite interesting. Like if I was looking in the mirror 15 years ago, I looked like an anxious addict. My bodily sensations were of an anxious addict. I had thoughts like an anxious addict, and I had feelings like an anxious addict. But the same Brian looks in the mirror today. I don't feel, look, or think like an anxious addict. But the same person is looking in the mirror. So there's a sense of self, that observer, that real self that can observe these thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations. And that's nearly the true self, whereas everything else is the false self, the labels, even the feelings and everything, the conditioned and programmed self. So we need to be careful of that. Like you see people that they're the fierce mother protecting their children. What happens when your children move out? You see some mothers where they don't want their kids to go because who would they be without their kids if
Mm.
they're the fierce mother, the all protector? So we need to be careful of that, you know?
I guess it ties into the kinds of stories we tell ourselves and how that becomes our truth. You know, they say that thoughts you keep having, they're a belief and they get locked in fairly quickly. I'll give you a
Yeah.
really terrible sporting example that I came across this week, and you can tell me whether I'm on the in the right uh, area or not. But I was playing golf with this guy, nice guy in his 30s, really good golfer, but actually his handicap, I assumed that he was almost like professional level, the way he hit the ball. He hit it an absolute mile, he had a beautiful swing. Everything was just lovely. And I said, "God, you must be very low handicap, are you?" Nearly off scratch, I'd say. And he goes, "No, he was off the same one I was." And I was like, "Well, I'm no professional." And before I could say anything, he said, "I can't putt. I just can't putt."
Wow.
And I was like, that's a strange thing to say. That was, it was like written. He would have carved it into a stone tablet there and then if he could. And for the rest of the round, I watched him. Sure enough, miss putts that were 2 foot, 3 foot. You
Yeah.
knew by the way he was walking onto the green, this story was so alive in his head. I cannot putt. That's me. And I was, you have the urge to go, put your arm around them and give them a little talk up the fairway, but just, it's not your place to do it. But it
Yeah.
was a small example of a story that we tell ourselves and then how it plays out. And I just imagined, I was wondering what would happen if he changed his language a little bit and said, I haven't learned yet how to sink putts. Or
Yeah.
I really would love some help with my putting. Or when I get my putting nailed down, then I'll be off that professional handicap. It was just
I
very
love that.
interesting. And then I
Mm.
was wondering, I wonder, because a sporting environment is a great indicator, I think, of the kinds of thoughts we generally have in the outside world. And I wondered what other thoughts he may have in his head about himself or other stories he might tell himself, because we all have them. I'm
Yeah.
not a good communicator. Oh, I'm not good socially, or I'm a very anxious person, or
Yeah. I can't
sure,
cope with anxiety.
yeah, yeah, and I'm
That was
sure
my
if
narrative.
yeah,
Mm.
as a neuroscientist, you must have looked into these stories we tell ourselves and the power that they can have over us.
Yeah, 100%. And this is the story of my recovery, or how I
Mm,
feel recovered, Dermot, as well. And I think like what we're talking about there at a more like global level is like growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And it's a limiting
mm,
belief that you have about yourself. But we are the stories we tell ourselves and believe. Like it's that inner narrative. And that's why being observant of your inner dialogue, your self-talk is so important. My story was I can't cope with anxiety. The consequences was years of drug abuse. My story today is adversity doesn't stop me, it fuels my ability to thrive. And I learned that through my experience with anxiety, changed my relationship with anxiety. So, bringing it back to treatment, actually, I was like this crazy meditator. This was after detox. I went to a treatment center where they all
mm.
thought it was mad. They were doing like meditations in the morning, meditations in the night. I'd be doing extra ones during the day. But I had this bizarre realization that one day that my mind was really quiet. And I was like, oh, wow, is this why I feel so amazing the last few weeks? There was a stillness, even there was a busyness of me wanting and doing and happy, a busy happiness about me. There was this weird stillness that was lurking underneath it as well. And this what was giving me the sense of everything was glowing, I believed. And this set me off on a path in academia. Like I wanted to know what is the relationship between language and emotions. And there's a beautiful theory. It's a bit of a boring theory. It's very academic, so I won't go into the details of it. It's called relational frame theory. But it basically looks at the link between psychological functions, one being emotions, and how we speak to ourselves. And in essence, language is a vehicle for emotion, or the brilliant poet Hafiz put it even better. The words we speak become the house we live in. So if you tell yourself you're a piece of crap, you're going to feel like a piece of crap. If you tell yourself you can't put, you're going to feel like someone who can't put. And that's what's driving that. Now, from a neuroscientific perspective, it's really, really difficult to pin this down because there's so many mechanisms going on. Like when we think of context and stories and the beliefs and how we talk to ourselves, like it's in the prefrontal cortex, but it's linked to other areas within the brain. But all of this, like top down, bottom up processing, there's like we used to think of the brain as all these separate sort of areas of the brain that do different things. But there's a new concept that is really being explored at the moment. It's called functional connectivity. So there's all these connections and pathways in different areas of our brains, and it's just too complex for us to understand this kind of a thing. But what we do know is that if you tell yourself a story, it will have an emotional response. It will be connected to that certain area. And that can then hold you back through emotions, through different elements of that as well. So, through functional connectivity within the brain, through the stories we tell ourselves, through the emotions that we feel as a result of that, we can trap ourselves in a cage and feel like we can't get out.
Mm,
And again, it really comes back to an ability to observe yourself. If you're telling yourself I'm a piece of crap, but you observe it, you could say, well, maybe that's not true. Maybe I'm not always a piece of crap. Maybe I'm good at some things. And you can like challenge those beliefs, challenge the assumptions you have
mm.
about yourself. Well, I've got some good puts. I'm not always a bad presenter. I speak well when I'm out with friends. Maybe I could bring that into the speaking environment. So it's about challenging and disputing these beliefs you have about yourself. But it nearly comes back to this fundamental principle of observing and having the awareness to catch those thoughts and those beliefs so they're not
Mm.
carrying you forward in life in unawareness.
But we're not always aware of the kinds of thoughts that we're having. I think it just is us. It's the noise in our heads. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's obvious to other people who can hear you repeating certain phrases and things, but we're not always aware of it ourselves. How do we get in touch with the negative or unhelpful stories that we're telling ourselves? How do we find out what are those beliefs that we have about ourselves that maybe aren't helping us?
Yeah, I think couple of ways. I'll say two things really quickly. Journaling is
Mm,
really powerful. Just journal about it, write about it, because you bring your thoughts into reality by putting it on a page. Therapy is another great way. You're bringing it into reality by talking about someone else and getting their opinion, but you have to do the work yourself. But if you're just doing this as an exercise on your own, what I would say to someone is just sit quietly for 20 minutes. Give yourself 20 minutes, and this could be life changing. So give yourself the bloody 20 minutes. Sit down and have a little listen internally. And sometimes there might be nothing there. There might be noises that you don't even see. There might be a dialogue going on. You could be saying to yourself, "This is stupid. This isn't even working. I'm not talking to myself." Who's saying that?
mm.
Like you're actually
Yeah.
talking to yourself while you're doing that. But then pay particular attention to the voice. What's the tone of the voice? What's the gender of the voice? Like I had a client one time, she was a woman and she realized, oh my God, my inner voice is a man. Oh my God, it's my bloody dad. No wonder I hate myself. He's telling me I'm a piece of crap for 50 years. So where's it coming from? Conditioning,
Mm,
false self, programming. Is it your parents? Is it somebody in school? What is the voice? How does it speak to you? And it's nuanced as well. There's different voices, and I'm not telling people
mm.
they have their psychopathy or anything like that.
Multiple
Well,
personalities.
yeah,
Yeah, but
psychosis.
but you know what? That's interesting because it after I started to be able to observe what was happening in my mind, there were little personas. My inner critic we had took on these weird personas. At one point, I talk about it in Mindful that it was like a nun, even though I had never had nuns, but it was a sort of, I guess it was a female judgmental, pointy
Hmm.
harshness to it.
Interesting.
Um, and then sometimes, and I catch myself still having this. When I went to university, I think I was in Trinity. I felt I didn't have many friends when I went there. I was pretty much by myself. All my friends had gone to other places. And I was very aware that I was from Limerick, and the Dubs there didn't know what to say when you said you were from Limerick. They practically just wanted the ground to swallow them up because they were like, oh my God, Limerick, this terrible, violent, culty place,
Yeah.
And I remember uh, the people I was most intimidated were probably, say the third years in university who kind of beard stroking glasses who would have opinions on things because I felt like I just didn't have an
Sophisticated
opinion.
opinions. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have any of that. Um, and sometimes I catch myself, even today, um, say it's if I'm imagining if I'm going to do say write a book or do a live show, that little sort of I'll hear a voice saying, um, what is this? Some kind of fluffy nonsense, or this is somebody trying to be and I realize that the person delivering those thoughts is this sort of judgmental academic-y student who's probably involved with some students union thing,
Debate
and
team.
but that person that I was
Yeah.
intimidated by when I was 18, young
Still
Limerick
there.
lad up in Dublin from the big smoke, it's still there. He's still in my head. And if when I feel those moments of weakness, of a bit of self-doubt, that when you're about to bring a project out
Yeah.
into the world and you have one of those wobbles, and that's generally the voice that I hear, kind of, who do you think you are? Who, what? You haven't got a master's or a PhD firing this stuff out left, right, and center. Who do you think you are? And it's that voice from when I was 18, isn't it mad?
That's mad. And it's brilliant because it's like that part of you is still there with you. And there's probably parts of you as a kid, parts of you
Mm,
from last year, like different moments in our life where there's a part, and it's that player, let's say, that played that role back then. Like you can't even remember him, but he embodied himself in you, and he's become a version of you that keeps you in
yeah.
I don't know what you'd actually
I,
say.
I remember there was one guy and his face is kind of in the face. And I
Yeah,
remember him telling me that he read Phoenix magazine, which was it was a kind of a satirical, haughty-taughty, political, gossip magazine, I suppose, for want of a better
yeah,
phrase. But it was sort of, if you were in that, again, that environment and you knew about politics and current affairs and economics and, and it would be exactly the kind of thing that I wouldn't have read. I was reading music magazines and
yeah,
Viz,
yeah. Shoot, I was
so
reading.
yeah, yeah. But it's so funny. That's that sort of bespectacled chin stroker
Yeah,
that I felt intimidated by, still in there at times of weakness. But I guess the difference is now I go, ah, I see what you're doing here,
yes,
you know?
yes.
And
And the
that's
funny
obviously
thing
when I hear it,
is,
I'm like, this means I'm on the right path. This is what
yeah.
I'm doing is absolutely I'm going to lean into it more now because it's pissing this little person in my brain off.
Do you know what I think is wonderful about that story as well? Is because the sophisticated Trinity College student, he didn't have it figured out. He was probably reading that magazine because it gave him a sense of self, and people probably thought that
Yeah.
way about him. I'm sophisticated. And when he did look sophisticated, he would have been triggered. And everybody has these challenges, these different parts of
Mm,
ourselves, these identities, these masks that we put on to be accepted, to feel a certain way. And it's I think it all does it. Do you think it always comes back down to awareness, Dermot, at the end of the day? I think that's the holy
yeah.
grail. Yeah.
I'm now acutely aware of the time and it's come to an end. I don't want to take up any more of your time. Brian, it's fascinating, man. Really love talking to you.
Same here, Dermot. I think we could have gone on a on so many different angles here. It was absolutely great. Loads of topics that I haven't talked about for such a long time. So this was super. It really, really
Great.
was.
Are you going to write any more books? I know you put the documentary series together, which was wonderful. Hooked, How Addiction Hijacks Our Brain. Absolutely brilliant. If people haven't gone to the
Thank
player and
you.
watched it, they really should. I make a brief cameo in it. Thanks for not putting
You
all of it on
do.
the cutting room floor. But I think it's really helpful and it's a great example of just the kinds of work that you're doing and that unique perspective you have, which is just helping so many people. And I know that you give a lot of talks, obviously, you work a lot in the corporate space and all that, but I know that you work a lot with communities. I know you've been into the prisons, and you're helping people across all sectors of society, and it's really invaluable work. So thank you, my friend, and I hope people
Cheers.
will get a lot out of our conversation as well.
Cheers. I appreciate that, Dermot. I think that's important as well, is that giving back piece. Like, it's, you got to feed your
Mm,
soul as well. So I think that's really important. Like, got to make a living, but feed the soul as well. And here,
yeah.
this conversation has fed my soul. It really has.
Yeah.
So good.
Well, I cut you
So
off
good,
there.
Dermot.
Are you people? I really recommend people get bonus time the book. Are you going to? Are you tempted to write another one?
I am. I think two of my biggest limiting beliefs was I can't write and I could never do public speaking. They are two of my greatest passions. I love writing. Like, I love it. Like, I've wrote several academic articles. I love that. I wrote the book. I love that. So I definitely have more books in me. I'm nearly trying to get myself financially stable. So my 50s will all be about writing books in a ski
Mm.
chalet in a beach. That's the dream, you know. But I've
Yeah.
I've notions. Oh, I have notions. It's
I know. Well,
it's
other countries call them dreams. In Ireland, we call
dreams.
them notions.
We have a language to stop you having dreams, you know. It's
Yeah.
crazy, but forget about that. I don't listen to that. But yeah, definitely a couple of books. I have a couple of ideas around books and just certain concepts, like of using life's challenges as a way to learn and grow. I call it beyond resilience. So I don't want to do another self-help book. I think I want to do sort of a novel like that is has
Mm.
embedded lessons within it. So that's something that I have percolating in the background there as well, and just love the public speaking, love podcasts, and just love this world that I'm in. So it's yeah, it's a great space to be. It's a great time to be able to do this kind of stuff, you know.
Yeah. Well, after playing golf with that fella the other day, my next book's going to be about how to sink those 2 foot
How to
putts
sink those
and tell
putts.
yourself a different story.
We need to get out for the game at some stage there. I mean, we,
Yeah.
we were threatening to get out for the game of golf for a long time. Actually, we'll have to make that
I
happen.
know. I'd love to. Brian, thanks so much, my friend. Absolutely
Thank
loved
you,
it.
Dermot. Thank you. Loved it as well.